Are you connecting all the dots on the journey to your inner wisdom? Are you looking for a fresh perspective on the messages you've been asking for?
So who doesn't want to be happier, healthier, wealthier, and wiser, and be able to make life's choices with confidence because they finally see the signs? We know you do.
I'm Angela Coulter.
And I'm Sarah Sieg Avignoni.
We're two conscious journeyers dedicated to turning over those rocks and helping you on your personal intuitive sleuthing mission of evolution in our multi-dimensional hologram.
And that includes Earth too.
Yes, it does. Welcome to Solving Me, our conscious puzzle-solving podcast, where we look at the natural relation between your life experiences and their meaning in the bigger picture, from the most mundane to the most overwhelming.
So what do we mean by all this? Well, have you ever thought that getting a flat tire and twisting your ankle could be related? And maybe a message about what's preventing you from getting that awesome, high-paying job you would love. Believe it or not, it's all connected.
Want to know more? Come on and let's get sleuthing. See what comes up in this episode, because it might just be about you. Welcome to episode 15. What a fun topic that can go in so many directions this time.
And it's so timely.
Very much so. Ha 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 ha. Our topic, as you might have guessed, is time today. Welcome, time. Thank you for joining us.
Right. And as we're, I guess we're a month in now from the springing forward. So we should, that sting of losing an hour should be lessening.
For some of us, because I think some of us, didn't I hear that we're going in different, like not everybody's doing it at the same time. I don't know. It's so confusing. I hope they really get rid of it soon. It's sort of crazy. But anyway, think of all the time we spend talking about time.
Right. How much time we waste as if it truly was something you could bank or a resource.
And I believe there was a movie about that where people, like the currency for people was how like they only lived to be a certain age, and like currency was getting more time on their like embedded watch or something like that. I can't remember what the movie was called. Interesting.
Not familiar with that.
That just came back to me. So time as a message. So many different things. Like, first of all, time is a construct that we've created. The perception of time is a construct and sort of a dimension, some will argue, that we've created to fit in our 3D happenings.
Well, and to help us manage the day-to-day, hence day, night, which then turns into weeks, which then rolls all into the month and the year.
Yeah.
And that's how we even mark where we are in our lives by our age.
Well, what's interesting too is look at time as we have set it up, right? It's very concentric. And we talk about consciousness as being concentric, right? So you have seconds, you have how many seconds in a minute, how many minutes in an hour, how many hours in a day, how many days in a month, how many months in a year, blah, blah, blah. And everything is sort of inside of each other. So we think of time as very linear, but is it?
Good point. Very good point.
So,
well, and I think the main problem that people have with time is there's not enough of it, or they feel limited by time, or they feel shortchanged or held back because there's not enough time.
Well, and think about this representation. We have, in essence, created time, the measurement of it, the construct of it. And yet we believe that we are victims to it.
Exactly.
So, and when we say victims to it, we're not saying that with judgment. We're saying that with this idea of, I have no control over time, right?
Time marches on.
Time is your enemy.
Right.
Or time is your friend, depending on who you talk to.
Yeah.
I didn't have enough time. I can't seem to find the time to do this.
Or time got away from me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's so many phrases that put us subordinate to time, that it's staunch, always will be, and it marches on with or without you. Versus I'm going to use time as a tool. I love the clocks that give you that extra hour in every day, where it just takes minutes from each hour and you end up with a whole nother hour in your day. And it's like genius. We
Yeah,
could do that easily.
I've not seen those. And yet people would say, how can you do that? Why not? We created it.
Exactly.
I love the clocks that I always say I want to get one of these that have it just is like on the top, it's like 1, 2, and then the whole pile of numbers is on the floor, and then underneath over it says whatever.
Right, right.
And
But
as we expand our consciousness, though, we supersede our victimhood to time, right? But our not only our victimhood, our slavery to time, because we
right.
realize that that's something that
Yes.
we've created.
Well, and I found a few phrases that are helpful for me to put time in a better perspective and see the relationship I have with it more realistically. Instead of saying I didn't have time for that, is something as simple as it wasn't a priority,
Mm-hmm.
because I make sure that the things that are a priority get done. There is time for that.
Correct. And so the message here on that, let's look at that for a moment. And I talk to a lot of people about this, is when you say, I don't have the time for this, really what is important to replace it with is, I am not prioritizing this.
Right.
And it's funny because that makes people balk, because then they judge themselves when you say, when you can say you're just victim to time, oh, I just don't have enough time, I can't get to it, then you still sort of have the door open to saying, well, it's not my choice. I would love to do it, but I just can't. When I say, it's just not a priority for me, then you have to face the mirror to say, well, then it's not a priority for me. The
Right.
next question is, and a lot of times it's when someone it's somebody's self-nourishment, somebody's self work or self-expansion or taking care of themselves is the lowest priority, when they say, oh, I would love to do this, but I can never do it. I would love to work out, but I just don't have the time. I would love to meditate, but I just don't have the time.
Yeah, because it's easier to say that. It's more socially acceptable to say that, than to say, I'm just not a priority. It's not
Which is the
important
truth.
for me to care for myself.
Which is the truth. And we're not saying that again with judgment, because the first thing that we want to do is go, oh, of course.
Well, and when I look at that, I can't help but feel like when I say the truth of it wasn't a priority for me, then you have no choice but to own it.
Yes.
And
Self-responsibility.
right. And when you fall victim or claim victim to time, you're not owning anything except the victimhood.
And the question is, what are we a victim to? That time, what does it do for us? What doesn't it do for us? We create those constructs in our mind, right? We think, oh, I'm going to run out of time. What does that mean? I'm going to die. But if we're eternal beings, that's how where we work from, it's like, well, then just the body goes away, but we don't go away. It's just, and outside of the bodies, there is no such thing as time.
Exactly.
So what is the message of, like, and I feel like time is a construct that we created that was purposeful to being able to measure here, embodied in this level of density and, set of dimensions or whatever, except we've just forgotten that. Because think about that. Think about how many different calendars have been out there over the years.
Right.
You've got the lunar
Yep.
calendar, you've got the Asian calendar, you've got the Gregorian calendar, you had the Roman calendar, you had
And the Mayan calendar.
the Mayan calendar. So many, and who's right?
Exactly. And I know that in other conversations you've talked about, when we talk about age, for instance, Yoda, and Yoda is however old. Well, where?
Yes.
And
Yes.
how is that at all relative to where I am? Because a year represents one orbit of the moon, 365 days. But what does it represent on another planet and another place in another
Right.
solar system? It's irrelevant. You cannot compare.
Right.
So it's interesting to, when you start throwing those curves in, you really can't even compare time.
Because then it goes away. It just dissipates right in front of your eyes. And that is like a realization. Yeah, I laugh about that because you think, okay, well, how many days did it take for the planet Yoda was born on to rotate around their sun? That kind of thing. And not many people think about that, because they do say it in the movie. So one of the movies somewhere, how old he was, and you're like, it's according to whose calendar? Because Earth doesn't exist in this story. I'm just saying. So time in many ways represents relativity that we've created for measurement. And
I see it as, and it keeps us anchored right here.
Yes.
And I believe that at some point it was probably intended to be a tool for staying in right now, but we have not kept it as such.
No. And when we really, let's get a little mind bending for a moment. When we really pull out a little bit and we get into consciousness, number one, there is no time. So you lose this perspective of, 100 years is a blip, right? In terms of being eternal. 1,000, 100,000 years is a blip. According to, the scales. But going back to what I was saying, how like we've even set up time to be concentric, even though we claim it's linear. And so we fool ourselves. And so of course we're going to feel like we're victim to it, because we've totally like lost what we were doing with it to begin with.
I completely agree. I completely agree. And look at all the episodes and stories and everything that we get out of entertainment talking about time, whether it's circular or going back in time or going forward in time or getting stuck in time.
Racing against time.
Right. Or getting stuck in time, like Groundhog Day, same day over and over and over and over. And I mean, we have, as you said, we've pretty much decided it's linear, but actually it's concentric, and it's all dependent on the planets. I mean, or the sun and the rotation and the movement. And I mean,
and everybody honestly measures it differently within their own consciousness, even though we have a construct that's common to all of us. Like, think about it. What comes to mind, what started playing in my head is, did you ever see the movie or the play Rent? There's this song in there that's 5,000, 2,500, 5,000, 600 minutes, right?
I know the song.
Yeah, that song. And it's like, how do you measure a year, right? And so the whole thing is like, measure it in love. Like, people measure time in different ways. Like, as a parent, you measure time through your child growing up, right?
Right.
You measure phases of your life based on what was going on, whether you were in this relationship or whether you're in, and that's a construct of time too. We talk about the decades of like what, the ages and stuff. We're talking about aging, and we create expectations around what that is. So, what within those constructs are important for you in terms of your journey, and why it's important for you to create your measurement of time through that.
So when we're looking at it in terms of, conscious solutions to everyday problems, the problems, how does time present problems in your life? Are you running out of time? Are you always late? Do you feel a victim to time? And that's the place to start to look and see where and how am I anchoring time into my life and the importance I place on it, and where am I falling short or losing to, the struggle with time. Those are really great places to start.
Also going back to what we were talking about before, having to do with prioritization, because I think that's one of the big messages that we have when we talk about running out of time or not having enough time is, well, then what am I prioritizing? What am I not prioritizing? What is
Exactly.
important for me to maybe reprioritize that I'm saying I don't have enough time to do, right? To say, does this really serve me? Because a lot of times I keep on saying a lot of times, it's so funny, I laugh about that. We put things on our plate, too many things on our plate to really get to ourselves, right? And a lot of times that's the message, is that we're doing so many things for other people that we're forgetting that we need to put that oxygen mask on ourselves first before
Yes.
we do it to others.
Well, and let's take it all the way back to the very first episode when we talk about how the messages show up to maybe we're not being congruent with our goals, with our
Yes.
bigger goals.
Yes.
And maybe this is a great place to take an examination of what your goals are. And if your goals don't include time for yourself or don't include time in a way that supports your goals, then it's time to reassess. Time to take a look at that and say, okay, let's go back to the other episode. Let's do some spring cleaning on our goals and priorities here.
Yes. There's a lot. And see, this is how this all starts to really interrelate and give us like some much more holographic kind of messages for ourselves. So look at that. I mean, that's the biggest thing that stands out to me about time is it talks about prioritization. It talks about really being real with what we're choosing in our reality.
Right.
It's not the right time. Or it's funny because as I've come into more consciousness over the years, it's been like going out there and outside of space and time, which is what we do in our consciousness because there is no time out there.
Right.
And all you can do is say, all right, it's important for me to get to this place in this moment for whatever reason. I'm going to prioritize that. So I'll land here in this time, right? And you get better at managing that. And so it might be off by a couple minutes, but then you stop looking at time in a more linear way. You start looking at it as something that can support you.
Right.
Here.
And it's flexible.
Yes. As flexible. It is flexible when you let it be. You can stretch time and you can squash time.
Yep.
All with your consciousness, but that's a discussion for another day.
Right. That doesn't fit in this episode.
No, but when we start to shift what time is there to help us with as a construct that we have created, then we can shift the message of what it creates for us.
Right. And we've proven to ourselves and have a reminder of how we can just all collectively agree that on this night, we're all going to willingly give up an hour. And miraculously, we do. The clocks change, our phones change, our watches changes, our clocks in our house. My car doesn't, so that freaked me out. But it just shows you that it is that flexible.
Well, it's
a great reminder.
It's our construct. We can do, and then there are some states and countries that don't do that. So are they wrong? No, they just have the time that they're choosing.
Right.
So again, it's to remember time is a construct and is flexible. And the key is to ask what it's there to show you. These things that we've talked about today are things that are the first places to look, the prioritization, and the other stuff around that. So see what it does and how you can turn it around to make it your support versus your enslavement.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to us on Solving Me. If you found this podcast helpful, make sure to subscribe so you get noticed every time we post a new episode.
And for a short time, we have a special bonus for you. Go to solvingme.net to download your free ebook, which outlines the next level of conscious solutions for your inner investigation.
Be sure to help us spread the word. Share us with others you know who want to solve the puzzles of their everyday life through the filter of expanded consciousness and have fun doing it.
One more thing. Do you have some puzzling life circumstances where you feel blocked and you'd like our take on what's going on? Send us your conscious puzzle at connect@solvingme.net, and maybe you'll be the topic of a future episode.
Until next time, happy sleuthing.